Hi, Olivia here. Welcome to Quantum Business Insights, where each week we explore new perspectives on the changing nature of business with thought leaders from around the world, and with a special emphasis on what I feel is our most valuable asset, our human capital. So today I'll be exploring our immunity to change. What a powerful topic. And my guest is David Zeitler. David is founder and president of Zeidler Executive Dynamics, an executive coaching firm with a focus on sustainable leadership transformation. He also serves as director of coaching for Minds at Work, an organization started by Robert Kegan and Lisa Lahey to support their cutting-edge research around change and how to make it last. So, David, welcome to Quantum Business Insights.
Thank you for having me, Olivia. It's great to be here.
Great. So, to get started, it seems like companies are being forced to constantly adapt just to keep up with the latest technology and pressures from global competition. And I know many organizations that have spent millions of dollars on change management efforts, but the results have been at least underwhelming, at least. And where I've seen it succeed is where the management team works on change on a personal level. You could even call it personal growth. But it can be extremely difficult for people to change. And this is where I think your concept of immunity to change is relevant. So what I'd like to explore is, why is change so difficult for some people? And what can we do to make it easier?
Yeah, so we're starting with a small topic, which is good. It's a daunting task to note that there is so much money, or it's a daunting, I guess, challenge to note that there is all this money being spent, and the changes that are hoped for are not sticky. So that, year in and year out, folks will go through a performance review, for example, and these are often very meaningful experiences for the people going through them on both sides of the table. They can even get emotional, and the dedication to make changes is palpable in these meetings. I know I've I've been through them, and I've experienced the same, what happens the next year, where here we go again. It's the same performance improvement challenges that I faced the year before. Mm-hmm. And this is a common story. And what Robert Kegan and Lisa Lahey decided to do in the face of this challenge was to take their wisdom from decades of adult developmental psychology and adult learning theory and bring it to bear on these gaps in changes, in this specifically this stickiness in change. And so they decided to focus on what Ron Heifetz, who wrote a book called Adaptive Leadership, what he calls the difference between adaptive changes and technical changes. And so, technical change is a change where you yourself do not need to change in order to make the change happen. And whereas an adaptive change is a change where you also need to change even as you are attempting to make the changes that are going to get you or your business or your team or your department to the next level.
So let me make sure I understand. So a technical change might be that I do something differently, but it doesn't require much from me, or just maybe it's something I'm already capable of because it's not where I have to change. Is that accurate?
That's very accurate, yes. So, for example, let's say you work for a global corporation and you are promoted, and in your promotion, you realize that you're going to have to be going back and forth to France. Let's choose a nice location in this example. So you got to go to Paris. You're going from New York to Paris, and you don't know how to speak French. And so you decide to get any one of the many language programs out there, or maybe you hire a teacher, and you learn to speak French because you know it's going to be good for business. That would be a technical change, because even though it might be difficult to do, you don't have to change your orientation to who you are or what's meaningful or what is important or what is the most valuable thing for me to be doing. You don't need to change that in order to make that happen. You will probably be able to learn French, and you'll probably have a much better time in Paris when you do so.
Okay, I got you. Thank you.
But on the other side, let's say that, and this is a very common example, let's say that you are promoted and you are now called to delegate. So let's say you're a sales representative and you are a superstar when it comes to sales. You're personable. You know how to reach out to people. You know how to connect with them. And because of all your success, you get promoted. So this is the typical example of, there's the title of that book, What Got You Here Won't Get You There. And now you're at this new level where the skill set that made you a superstar when it came to sales are now, it's difficult for you to employ that same skill set when you are called to delegate tasks to a team. It's a different set of skills that requires you to change. Oftentimes, it will require that individual to change how they relate to people. It's difficult sometimes for a person who is so good at sales to now start risking whether or not the team is behind them, whether or not the team likes them to the point where they can effectively get the job done. A lot of times there will be a kind of lingering worry that if I am not liked, then my team is not going to do the good job that I need them to do. And so that becomes an adaptive challenge to that manager.
Wow. I had a similar experience, believe it or not. I wasn't in sales, but I was hired early in my an analyst career, I guess you'd say, as a data analyst, and I did great work, and then they promoted me to manage the team, and I didn't have a clue. I had never had that experience, and I panicked, right? I probably didn't do my best, and I sought out HR to send me to training because I also figured out that was the only thing. I needed those skills to actually advance my career, but it was difficult. I remember that, and I realized that company was very profitable, but they were still pretty small or a young company, and so I think a lot of companies don't understand that transition to being a manager and how that just takes a whole different set of skills, and if you're not used to it or naturally comfortable with it, it really does require that adaptive change.
Exactly. Adaptive change isn't always required. Sometimes, you might have someone who's just a sort of superstar in all areas, and they won't experience that as an adaptive change. But for most people, changing that kind of change where it's a whole different skill set that puts you maybe at risk for coming up to your edge, the edge of your mindset, so to speak. And at the edges of our mindset, that's where we face these adaptive challenges. We need to adapt to a different kind of mindset in order to be able to meet those change challenges.
Wow, that's great. So tell me a little bit about the techniques that you propose that might help someone with adaptive change.
Yeah. I've sort of spent the many years now supporting and promoting immunity to change. So that would certainly be the method that I would advocate for. And it's a process that is at once it's an event in one sense because it starts with the creation of something that we call an immunity map. And an immunity map is you can do it in anywhere between 1 and 2 hours, and these have been done around the world with tens of thousands of people at this point have created immunity maps. Robert Kegan and Lisa Lahey have been running workshops, train the trainer workshops for many years now, and starting in about the early 2000s. And what you do in that workshop is you identify a goal that's very important to you, and oftentimes, because this is done in the context of work, what you're identifying is a professional goal. Sometimes they recommend you actually do look at a performance improvement program or a yearly performance review, and you can sort of draw your goal from that. But the key is that it's very important. It's one of the big rocks, as they say. That you got, getting those big rocks in there first is important. I mean, we all know what happens if you have 100 emails and the most significant things that are on your plate, you kind of push it off. You're like, well, I'll just answer these 100 emails, and then when I'm clear and I have enough clarity and space, then I'll bring in, this very significant thing that needs to be done. And it's seductive for us to believe that will work. But one of the things we find is that an adaptive kind of what we call a psychological immune system is this way of protecting ourselves that keeps us from having to make adaptive changes. And that's one of the ways that we can push that big rock off, is we convince ourselves that these little things are kind of more important.
So it's really a method for avoidance, it sounds like. And it would be unconscious, right?
Yes, exactly. And that word unconscious, we actually use that term. We say that there's a sequence in which someone surfaces the thing that's holding them back from making an important change. This is a change that is very important to them. So in a sense, when it comes to an adaptive challenge, we all start out unconsciously immune. We are not conscious of the fact that we are in fact engaging in all of these very, very useful and intelligent, you might say, ways of protecting ourselves from having to engage in adaptive change. So this map that I was mentioning, it starts by getting the person to agree, yeah, this is a change that's very important to me, and then you sort of go through a set of behaviors that are taking the person away from that change. So this might be an example of one of those behaviors. If I was working with an immunity to change coach, I might say, yeah, I have this very significant thing that I need to work on, which is to delegate. But instead of delegating, I kind of answer all my emails first, and then before I know it, it's 5:30 and my team has already gone home. So that might be a behavior that I would say, this is taking me away from my goal that I need to delegate for. So that right there, that's 2 steps in what is actually a multi-step process. But that's that people are very familiar with. Because what happens usually at that point is that a coach or a trainer or a mentor or someone from HR will say, okay, great, this is good. We've identified the behavior that's getting in the way. Now let's create a set of behaviors that do the opposite of that, because that is how we can make the change happen. So that's what we call the traditional change approach. And that is something that does work when it comes to technical changes. So we always say at Minds at Work, we say, if you can make a change happen through technical means, you should always do it. Because that is by far the most cost-effective way of making change happen. But if you're trying to make adaptive changes and you are meeting those adaptive challenges with these technical change approaches, then you are very much wasting money, because that's just not going to work. Prescribing a set of behaviors that just go to the opposite of the behaviors that are taking you away from your goal, it just doesn't work. It might work for like a couple of weeks, but inevitably the gravity of your current mindset will sort of pull you back into old behavior patterns. And this is, in fact, what you see in case studies from the business world.
So this is sort of the nature of what traditional change management has been doing for years, is what you're saying, or most of it.
I don't want to suggest that that's all they've been doing. There's certainly been, good approaches to change, but I think the generalization that there is a difference between technical and adaptive changes, and that many times leaders are attempting to make adaptive changes happen through technical means. I think that's true. I think that what you said is true insofar as that is happening.
So would the method perhaps be that you try the technical, and then once you see that those aren't working, then you know you're dealing with something adaptive and you want to dig in and use the method. Okay.
Yeah, more and more. And that's sort of one way. The other way is that, you're interested, you have this leadership team, for example. And this is the other thing that we have done, I mean, in my own business as well as in my work with Minds at Work, is that you have a group of people that are thoroughbreds in the organization, and they need more tools in order to become superstars. So they're sort of on this fast track, and part of their leadership development program will be going through the immunity to change process, because it's this proven method of transforming people, of getting people from whatever mindset they are at into their next mindset.
Gotcha. Okay.
So that's the two main ways that this approach has been used. But I feel a little bit like I left like a hanging thread there. I left people hanging a little. I'm thinking about your listeners now, and I want to go back, if that's all right with you, to this place, this difference between the kind of traditional change approach and then what makes immunity to change different.
Sure. Yeah. Why don't you do that?
Okay. Great. Thanks. So the traditional change approach would be just, prescribe the new behaviors and then kind of say, all right, here you go, and then send them off on their way, and then maybe check in once every week or maybe once a day even if it's very important and pressing. And the reason it doesn't work, as I said, is because it's usually, a technical solution to an adaptive challenge. So how do you get into the adaptive solution to the adaptive challenge? Well, you start by taking those behaviors and generating a set of commitments to self-protection. This is where the notion of adult mindsets starts to become very important, because oftentimes we have an unconscious commitment to a kind of self-protection that is about something extremely important to us. So let's take the example of the person who needs to delegate. It's a 5 out of 5 of importance on a scale of 1 to 5. How important is this to you? They might have what we call a competing commitment that, well, if I might also be committed to making sure that I am not disliked by my team. Yeah, so it's, we don't normally think about the ways that we ourselves might be, inhibiting the changes that we want to make. It's, it's a little bit unpalatable, and, it in a sense, it doesn't really make a whole lot of sense to us to think in that way. And the reason that, according to immunity to change, the reason it doesn't make sense is because we have these unconscious commitments. And so one of the things that we do in this, this first step, which is the creation of this map, is to surface the psychological immune system. We want to know, okay, if there is a change that is very difficult for someone to make and it's very important to them, chances are that there might be something adaptive happening. So let's see what we can find. And we take them through these steps. And as you were saying, we eventually get to this place where we generate a couple of what we call competing commitments. And I think the example I gave was, so if my goal is to be a better delegator, to delegate more to my team, then a competing commitment might be, I might also be committed to making sure that I am not disliked by the members of my team. Mm-hmm. And what this usually does for people is they actually get a sense of relief because it helps them make sense of why this change has been so difficult for them.
Right.
And the reason it does that is because you can see how, you have one foot on the gas, which is your goal, but then you also have one foot on the brake. And that's not a car that is standing still. That is a car that is not moving, but it is in a sense shaking with energy. There's a lot of energy, but that energy is not being used to move the car forwards. And the reason is because the brake is on this competing commitment.
Got you. So isn't there some statistic also that some high percentage of our behavior is not conscious or unconscious.
Yeah, I mean, there's a whole field about that. I mean, the most famous touch point, I think, for most people is Malcolm Gladwell's book. I think it was Blink, where he talks about how much of our processing, our mental processing, operates in an unconscious fashion. And there's even some good research by a fellow named Dijkster Hugh that I learned how to pronounce his name, but it's spelled Dijksterhuis, I think is how you spell his name, which that there's this kind of optimal window within which we can use our unconscious mental processing very optimally, but that below the number of data points and above the number of data points, we're better off using conscious processing. So there is a kind of sweet spot of unconscious processing that we kind of all engage in. We don't think about moving our legs, for example. We just kind of, our legs move. We don't have to consciously consider that. But it's similar to, the way this kind of relates to immunity change is that our unconscious processing, by not being available to our conscious awareness, the reason why that this system isn't always available for us to operate upon is because it is defining the edge of our development. And in fact, becoming aware and attending to the edge of our own growth and development is one of the things that is sort of required for continuing to grow and change in the sense of quantum leaps, to use a phrase that I know you are familiar with and have affinity for.
Yes.
So what we find is that underneath this immune system, this psychological immune system, are a set of what we call big assumptions. And that if you work on the big assumptions, the immune system becomes unimportant. That's the best way that I can put it, that the way you can finally overcome an adaptive challenge and start making those goals happen is by undoing the source of the immune system.
Right.
And so those big assumptions, we generate those big assumptions from the competing commitments. So it's really this very there's something very beautiful about how we surface these immune systems, and then skipping to kind of fast forwarding to the end, the changes that I've seen in people are just, they're tremendous. I feel blessed and honored to be sort of standing shoulder to shoulder with people who are on these journeys that are so important.
Well, and I think it'd be fun to share with our listeners that I went through this process with you, right?
Oh, yes, that's right.
So my commitment, my edge was to share more of my research and passion for the human side of business. Mm-hmm. And I'm known mainly in the industry for my work around data analysis and predictive modeling and big data. Right. So what I uncovered in this process was competing commitment to keep that safe, that there would be a risk to my survival perhaps, since I still earn a lot of my living wages doing data analysis, that might, so for some reason, disappear, that I would lose my credibility or whatever.
Right. There it is. I would lose my credibility. That sort of captures everything I think you just said.
Yeah. And so by actually speaking to it, having it unveiled to me, and then saying, oh, I get it. Okay, so that's interesting, but it's probably not that realistic. And, and then we'll get into the next steps, but by continuing the process, the immunity change process, so here I am. I'm now sharing my interest live and in person because of having gone through this process. So, so please continue.
Well, I'm very touched that you would suggest that our work had something to do with what you're doing now, but I think that's if it did, then I do feel, once again, here I am honored and blessed, to be publicly sharing with you in this manner. So thank you for that.
Pleasure.
But yeah, as you said, it's the mapping is really just the beginning. The process itself, or the methodology. So that's, the first part is an event, and the event is create a map. Mm-hmm. And then the next part is taking the map and then using it to gain insight. And so we have this insight phase that we go through in the coaching arc. And then the second phase of the coaching arc is action. So there's a lot of argument about who came up with this quote. Some people say it's from Immanuel Kant, and some people say that no, it's just sort of nobody really knows. But everybody's heard some version of it, which is that insight without action is impotent, and action without insight is blind.
Wow. Yeah. And the unconscious piece being brought to consciousness, I guess, is the insight. Right?
Exactly. So the insight phase is really, it begins with the event of creating this immunity map, and then the first half of the coaching arc is, all right, let's look at this map, and this in particular, let's identify this, one or two or sometimes three big assumptions, then look at which one is most important for supporting the psychological immune system, and then we get clarity. Sometimes we go into the history of it, sometimes we go into the forward progress of what it would look like if it was not present in one's life, and then we start the self-observation phase. So it's really there's a lot of mindfulness exercises that we engage in this insight phase. And as soon as, one of the things that we never want the perfect to be the enemy of the good in immunity to change coaching. So, whereas, I found some other methods where there's just, I felt like, all right, let's get going. It's messy, actual psychological development, actual change when it comes to adaptive change is messy. And you're throwing the tracks in front of the train, and, things are happening in real time, and it can be exhilarating, and, you can also feel daunted at sometimes, but when you get to that action phase, and you can craft these safe experiments in a way that brings someone closer to their next mindset, which is really, this is what Ken Wilber calls eros, the desire to integrate, the desire or drive to kind of become part of something larger. Well, we all have these nascent mindsets into which we are developing, and in a sense, that is this larger thing that we are drawn to be a part of. It's our own kind of future self that we want to be a part of. And so that helps sustain people as they are going through this action phase, which, if you propose these actions at the beginning before someone did their immunity map, that's exactly the kind of thing where they might not even feel any anxiety about it. They might say, oh, sure, I'll do that, but then not do it.
Right.
It's the 100 emails. It's the, no, I got to get to these emails first. Yep. Oh, did I not have time for that? Oh, well, I guess that's too bad. But, but now that we've gone through the insight phase, all of a sudden the importance and the reality of my big assumption that I have sort of been, I'm curious now for the first time maybe that my assumptions about what will and will not affect my livelihood or affect my credibility in your example, or in my example, when I first went through this, it was, this whole program is gonna fall apart and we're all gonna not have jobs. So, these are very important big assumptions that are sort of driving us. And so first you make them conscious, and then you gain insight around them, and then you start to undo them. And at the end of the process, you get a radio show.
There you go. So tell me more about, or what are these safe experiences? And I kind of have that from my perspective, but I'd like a general, I guess this is one of the steps, right? So let's say, how would you talk about creating a safe experience that will take you to your next level?
Yeah, this is really where the certification in being an immunity to change coach, I think, is very important, because we have been trained to craft safe experiments, and we kind of use the acronym SMART. There's a number of SMART acronyms in the business world. Our SMART acronym is safe, modest, actionable, researchable test.
Oh.
And so you want to make sure that any kind of experiment that you're creating. So this is a little bit like, well, let me give you an example of an unsafe kind of experiment about a big assumption.
Okay.
So let's say you are Christopher Columbus and you believe the world is flat, and so does your crew, more importantly, your crew. And you are sailing to India, and you haven't hit it, and it's been many days now, weeks even, and you're still sailing, and the more you sail, the more and more people's assumptions that they're going to fall off the end of a flat Earth are kind of taking them over. I mean, what an unsafe way to test this assumption that that I can get to India this way because the normal route was go around the Horn of Africa. So it took so long to kind of get to India from Europe by ship that's why that's the myth anyway. I mean, there's a lot of new evidence now about the Chinese actually did it a long time before that, and so maybe they knew, maybe they didn't. But let's just go with the myth for now because it's a good example of this big assumption and an unsafe way of testing it. Right. So eventually they find land, and there is the data. That's the data from this experiment that they've done that no, they're not going to fall off the face of the earth. They're not going to fall off a two-dimensional. They're actually going to hit land and they're going to be safe.
So they experienced adaptive change, but it was way more stressful than it needed to be, basically.
Yes, exactly. So that's an example of a very unsafe experiment. So how would I or any kind of immunity to change coach has been certified make an experiment like that, but make it safe? Well, the first thing I might do is have them go talk to other explorers and say, okay, well, what have you done? How far out into the ocean have you gone? What did you experience out there that I can talk to you about? And let's assume that they're not trying to, lie to them and, on all those maps they wrote, oh, here be monsters because they wanted to keep the resources that they had discovered to themselves. Let's just forget about all that. So, or else, and then the next step might be, okay, now that you've talked to, so that gives them a little bit of data. Okay, I'm not the only one who's kind of considering this. In fact, there are all these people that I talked to who have already done this kind of thing, and they're still here. Right? That's the kind of important point. How come Bob, who is so much like me, can delegate and I have a problem delegating? How come he doesn't suffer the consequences that I believe are going to happen to me? So you can't run that experiment until you've surfaced your immune system and honed your big assumption. So now that person can maybe go and interview Bob and say, hey, I'm wondering if you'll be willing to talk with me about your delegation practices and what are the challenges you face with it. And inevitably that kind of first very safe test will give them very good data, and now they've it gives them confidence in continuing to sort of turn up the volume very slowly on testing.
So you would identify the interview as a form of a test in this model, is what you're saying?
It's a kind of test or experiment where the goal is not to make a behavior change. The goal is for them to gather data on whether or not their big assumption is true.
Got it. Okay. Interesting. That's a different way of looking at it. Okay.
Yes, exactly. It's good that eventually, most immunity change coaches will, near the end of the sort of experimental or testing period, will start to turn the volume up to the point where the changes or the experiments themselves have actions in them that are actually pulling them towards their goal. But until you've dipped down into this mindset, until you've dipped down into the mindset and revealed it and started to work on it, you just can't do that. You'll get a technical solution to adaptive change, and the person will go back to their old behavior. So by taking them through this coaching arc, they are poised to start actually doing those behaviors that pull them towards their goal because they have good evidence that their big assumption, even if it's sometimes valid, the consequences that they were so worried about don't happen. Or the consequences do happen and they don't care.
Okay, so in your example, let's say she goes and interviews Bob and gets some data, and if you're coaching her, you might be asking her, I guess along the way, do you feel like you could now create an experiment where you do a little delegating? Like, would that be a natural progression there? Or
Sure. Like I might have them do that first experiment where they interview someone, and then it depends on the person really, and it depends on where do I think they are with this? How safe actually is this experiment? Because one of the risks is that I, as the coach, become part of their immune system, and that then I am now being constructed as threatening because I am trying to perturb or disturb this thing that has kept them safe for so long. Basically, the reason that you tune up, you tune up or you turn up the volume or ramp up the experimental phase very slowly is because this is an adaptive system. So being adaptive, the system of self-protection will construct the world and possibly the coach, because the coach is, of course, part of their world, as being unsafe in some sense. And so while you want to make sure you're making the changes happen, when you're attempting to sort of undo or deconstruct or help someone transform through this process, it's actually much better to go slowly. It's far more effective to go slowly than it is to go quickly through a transformative process. And that is one of the reasons why the traditional change approach does not work with adaptive challenges, because the attempt is to go quickly. And we live in a business world that moves at quantum speed, right?
Right.
It's like we need it yesterday. So it's a little bit of a different, angle on what it means to be effective. What is both cost effective in terms of HR, but also what is effective for being adaptive. Businesses want to be flexible and nimble, and the idea that transformation should happen slowly is counterintuitive in some sense to a lot of leaders' positions and the demands of leadership.
The pressures.
Yes, exactly. But the leaders who have engaged this process and gone slowly through it have been very happy for the most part. I haven't had any complaints yet, so that's good.
Well, so that brings me to a question when you were saying about speed of change, and I'm reading a lot about how younger people are. Their minds are developing somewhat differently because they are sort of online at a young age, and they are used to technology. And have you noticed, and it may not be age, but different levels of adaptability or the speed of adaptability among people? Are there any kind of characteristics that you've noticed?
Wow, that's a really good question. I mean, I've certainly noticed. I've done an immunity change coaching arc with so many people now, and literally from Main Street to Wall Street and many different ages. I think the youngest person I've worked with was 21, and the oldest person I've worked with is in his 80s. So I really have kind of had a broad range of experience with using this method, and I'm always curious whether the differences I'm seeing are cultural or are in some sense, about are they surface differences or are they structural differences? As I came to immunity to change coaching through my research in developmental psychology in adult development, and before that, I got to adult development by loving sort of Piaget and childhood development. So, I think there's two things at work here. One is that we construct our world as much as we are receptive of our world. So there was this idea in the beginning of the 20th century, in education, that children are a tabula rasa, and you can they're a chalkboard and you write on them, and they can dutifully kind of reproduce the information or behaviors or actions that you're attempting to write on this blank chalkboard.
No wonder I didn't like school.
And Piaget really came along and said, wait a minute, this is not true. Actually, children aren't just tabula rasa. They are constructing their world in the way that they can, as much as they are kind of receiving. So there's really this he called it interactionism. There's really this two-way street that's always going on. So when it comes to mindsets, whether it's childhood mindsets or adult mindsets, my experience is that the mindsets themselves, what people are identified with subjectively versus what can they take as object, what is in their field of awareness, that really, there's very good evidence that that this is something universal, and that we have a good kind of grasp of how subject and object play out at these different mindsets. However, what does seem to change is the content that is being put into the system and then used. So, for example, the easiest example for people to see is the process of socializing teenagers. Around the world, socializing teenagers is not easy. You're attempting, parents and teachers are attempting to get the teenager to coordinate their needs with the needs of another.
Oh,
and,
right.
And not in some way where it's about, not where it's a ruse, where the other person is an object to them, a means to an end, but that in some sense the teenager starts to take the needs of the other with them wherever they go.
Okay.
So it's not a kind of out of sight, out of mind process, but they're taking first, usually a parent or a mentor, but then eventually they start imbibing. They in a sense drink the Kool-Aid in the best sense. They start to adhere by the norms of the family, of the group, of the country, and that's a very important and useful process. It's necessary in order to transcend it, in order to get to what is now demanded of adults, which is this more self-authoring. This self-authoring mindset, which the numbers show us only about, 30% or so, 30 to 34%, depending on which meta-analysis you're looking at, of college-educated Western adults have this self-authoring mindset, have kind of fully achieved it. And yet that is the mindset that is demanded of us.
Wow.
So it's a different kind of mindset. It's going to show up slightly differently. So I do see, when it comes to ages, I do see a difference in how, for example, the 20-something clients that I have been working with use technology to connect with others, and how quickly they can partake in any new technology that comes up.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
However, when it comes to needing to feel confident asking for a raise, or when it comes to going from a position where they don't have to delegate to a position where they do have to delegate, or when it comes to needing to learn how to listen better, it is very similar adaptive challenges that they are facing as someone who is in their 50s.
Wow, so that's fascinating. I think we could do a whole show on that. But I wanted to allow, we just have a few minutes left, and I wanted to allow some time, so thank you for that. I wonder, are there some tools that are available for people who may want to pursue this, this technology, this immunity to change model?
Yes. First and foremost, I'll give you two sort of least expensive, least, commitment oriented ways of experiencing immunity to change. So as luck would have it, in late January, Harvard is launching in association with MIT. They have created these massive open online classes, and they are free of charge. And it's so if you want to get more information about that, it's just Google Harvard X, and then next to that type immunity to change. So what you'd be Googling is Harvard X, one word, immunity to change, and it's Harvard the letter X, not Harvard EX, and that will take you right to the sign up for this free, basically online course that's led by Bob Kegan and Lisa Lahey. And you will be taken through the steps of an immunity change system. Right now, about 30,000 people have signed up. I don't think there is a limit. So that's the easiest way. Now, you will probably have to buy the book. So that's available both in electronic format on a Kindle or a Kindle app, as well as you can get the old school copy, hard copy,
which us older people like.
Yeah, it's I like both. I mean, they have different advantages, right?
Yeah, well, fiction I like on the Kindle, but for my research, I love the. Anyway.
Yeah, for research purposes, it's hard to not write in the book.
Mm-hmm.
And then the second way, which is coming in 2014, I can't say exactly when, but my hope, or I guess our hope, is that it will be in quarter 1 or quarter 2 of 2014. Is that Rob Smith, who is the president of Integral Life, has created a company called Chrysalis, and their focus is on an open software platform of change. So they are dedicated to bringing change pathways, and the portal that they're using are smartphones. So it's a very wise move, I think, on his part to see that smartphones are not just a part of they're not just a part of our our kind of day-to-day work operations. They're sort of infused in our professional and our personal lives at this point. And so they're kind of taking advantage of this trend and just making the next logical step, which is let's offer people these pathways to change. So there's all kinds of different pathways, and immunity to change is going to be one of those paths that's available through Chrysalis. So there's two very 21st century means to interact with the immunity to change system.
That's amazing. Well, thanks. Well, we have about a little less than 3 minutes left. So let me ask you, say, if somebody wanted to come to you for coaching, what would be the first couple questions you might ask them?
Oh, well, yeah. I mean, the first question I always ask is, what brought you to wanting to be coached?
Got it.
What's basically like, what's going on? Let's just have a casual conversation, because usually that's, at that point, if someone is seeking out coaching, then it usually means there is, they've been suffering because they've been trying to make a change happen, and it's been elusive, and that is indeed where that's where this method can be so powerful.
Wow. Well, and I remember when I worked with you, the thing that was so great was your ability to kind of rule things out. So I won't get into specifics. I can't even remember all the details, but for me to try to figure out what was my competing goal, I thought you were just so gifted in, I'm going to use the word hammering. It's not really the right word, but taking me out of my head to just be able to say, this is what I'm thinking, or actually what I was feeling. So I tend to overwrite things with my left brain, but because of your style, which was so effective, and I mean it in the most positive way, I could then just say, here's what I'm feeling, and then when it got down to this level of fear, I don't know if I would have gotten to that if I'd stayed in my left brain and been real, methodical about it.
Yeah, no, I really appreciate that. It's one of the things we definitely were trained in is the kind of empathic listening that allows us to see when is it most important to support, when is it most important to challenge, and that's really kind of what it comes down to. So I really appreciate that.
Well, my pleasure. So it looks like we're about out of time. David, thank you so much for being my guest today, and I hope you come back and visit me again.
Oh, I would love to. It's been a real pleasure, and of course, an honor to have worked with you in Immunity to Change. So thanks for bringing that in.
Oh, thank you. So next week, I'm going to be exploring how to create a culture of innovation with Mitch Ditkoff. And you really want to tune into this. Mitch is the #1 ranked creativity blogger in the world in 2010 and 2011. And he's a regular contributor to the Huffington Post. So be sure to tune in next week. I'm your host, Olivia Parr Rud, saying thank you for tuning in to Quantum Business Insights. Have a great week.